When the Morrison family left the house 6 months after moving in, they refused to explain why. Neighbors watched them load their belongings in the middle of the night, in silence, as if fleeing from something. Their 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, looked back at the house one last time from the car, and she told her mother she saw someone at the second-floor window, the window of the room that was always locked, the room nobody used, the room whose key they never found. Let me take you back to the beginning. It was September 2019, and the Morrison family had just bought their dream home, a magnificent 3-story Victorian mansion on Victorian Street in Salem, Massachusetts. Catherine Morrison, 38, a history professor, had always dreamed of an old house with character. Her husband James, 41, an architect, loved the detailed craftsmanship and original woodwork. Their daughter Sophie was 7 and thrilled to have her own room in a real big house. The house had been built in 1887 by a doctor named Dr. Edmund Blackwell. It had remained in the Blackwell family for over a century before being sold in 2015. Since then, it had changed owners 6 times in 4 years. The real estate agent had explained that previous owners had all moved for professional reasons, job transfers, opportunities elsewhere. Catherine and James didn't ask more questions. The price was surprisingly low for a house this size in this neighborhood. They thought they'd found a bargain. The first few days were perfect. The house was beautiful. The high ceilings, the original hardwood floors, the stained glass in the stairwell. There was a library on the first floor with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a living room with a marble fireplace, a dining room that could seat 12. On the second floor was the master bedroom, Sophie's room, and a guest room. And then there was the 4th door in the hallway, the door that was always locked. James had tried every key they'd been given. None worked. He called the real estate agent who said she'd checked with the previous owners, but she never called back. James had considered forcing the lock, but Catherine told him to wait. They had plenty of other rooms. They'd deal with that one later. It was during the first week that Sophie started talking about the lady. She said there was a kind lady who visited her at night, a lady in a white dress who sat on the edge of her bed and told her stories. Catherine and James smiled. Imaginary friend. New house. Perfectly normal for a 7-year-old. But Sophie insisted. The lady was real. She had long black hair. She smelled like roses. And she was sad. Very, very sad. The second week, the sound started. Footsteps on the second floor late at night. Catherine and James told themselves it was an old house. Old houses make noise. Floors contract and expand. Pipes click. Perfectly normal. But the footsteps had a rhythm, a deliberate cadence, up and down the hallway, always stopping in front of the locked door. Close your eyes now. Take a deep breath. And let me tell you what really happened in that house during the months that followed. The third week, Catherine started smelling the roses throughout the house. A sweet, heavy perfume that seemed to move from room to room. But there were no roses. James smelled nothing. Sophie said it was the lady. The lady always smelled like roses. The 4th week, James found the marks. Scratches on the locked door. From the inside. As if someone had tried to get out. The marks were fresh. The wood was pale where it had been torn. But it was impossible. The door was locked from the outside. There was nobody inside. There couldn't be anybody inside. James decided to force the lock. He used a crowbar, working for over an hour. The lock was old but solid. Finally, with a loud crack, the door opened. James stood there, looking inside, and then he closed the door softly. Catherine asked him what was inside. He said there was nothing, just an empty room. But his face was pale, and that night he nailed the door shut. Catherine waited until James was at work. She removed the nails. She opened the door, and she saw what James had seen. The room wasn't empty. It was full of antique furniture covered in dusty white sheets. A bed, a vanity, a rocking chair, and the walls. The walls were covered in writing. Hundreds of words scrawled over and over. The same message repeated thousands of times. Let me out. Let me out. Let me out. Catherine left the room and closed the door. She didn't tell James. But that night she researched. She discovered the truth about Dr. Edmund Blackwell. He'd had a daughter. Margaret Blackwell. In 1903, when she was 22, she became ill. A mental illness, the document said. Dr. Blackwell locked her in a room on the second floor. For her own good, he'd said. For her protection. She stayed in that room for 14 years, until her death in 1917. She never left, not even once. If you're enjoying this story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more terrifying tales like this one. And in the comments, tell us which story you want to hear next. The events intensified after that discovery. Sophie started having nightmares. She'd wake up screaming, saying the lady wasn't nice anymore. The lady was angry. The lady wanted out. Catherine would find Sophie standing in front of the locked door, asleep, scratching at the wood with her fingernails. The footsteps became louder, more frequent, not just at night, but during the day. Catherine was home alone one afternoon when she heard them, slow and deliberate, coming down the stairs. She was in the kitchen. She could see the staircase from where she stood. There was nobody there, but the steps creaked one by one, as if someone heavy was descending. James installed cameras, for cameras covering every angle of the second floor. That first night, they watched the live feed on his laptop. At 2 in the morning, the camera pointing at the locked door started to shake. Not much, just a slight tremor, and then the sound, a scratching, slow and steady, like fingernails on wood. James ran upstairs. The hallway was empty. The scratching stopped. But when he checked the door, there were new marks. Fresh. Deep. They tried to leave. They put the house on the market. But no buyer stayed long. They'd visit. They'd like the house. And then something would happen. A door would slam. A sudden cold. A shadow in the corner of their eye. And they'd leave. Quickly. The last night was in March 2020. 6 months after moving in. Catherine woke at 3 in the morning to freezing cold. The temperature in the bedroom had dropped sharply. Her breath was visible. James slept beside her. She could see their bedroom door from the bed. It was closed. She was sure of it. But slowly, very slowly, it began to open. Catherine didn't move. She watched the door open completely. The hallway beyond was dark. And then she saw it. A figure, thin and tall, in a white dress, long black hair, standing in the doorway. Not moving, just standing there, watching. Catherine closed her eyes. When she opened them, the figure was closer, beside the bed now. Catherine could see its face, young but emaciated, pale, dark hollow eyes, and the expression. Such sadness, such anger, such hunger for freedom. The figure reached out. Catherine felt cold fingers touch her face, and then she heard a voice, a whisper barely audible. "Let me out." Catherine screamed. James woke up. The lights came on. The room was empty, but Sophie was standing in the hallway, in front of the locked door, eyes open but unseeing, sleepwalking, and she was talking, but it wasn't her voice. It was the voice of an adult woman, desperate and pleading. "Let me out. Please. Let me out." They left that night, took what they could carry, left everything else. The house stood empty for 8 months. Then it was sold again. The new owners left after 2 months. Then others. Then more. The house on Victorian Street is for sale again now. The price has dropped again. The real estate agent doesn't mention the history, doesn't talk about previous owners. 17 different families in 5 years. None stayed longer than 6 months. Most left within weeks. Catherine Morrison doesn't talk about what happened. Not publicly. But she told her sister one thing. That last night, when Sophie was speaking in that other voice, she said something else. After "let me out," she said, "I'm not leaving alone. Never alone again." This is the true story of the Morrison family and the house on Victorian Street in Salem, Massachusetts. The house still stands. It's still for sale. And every night, if you pass by, you might see a light in the second floor window. The window of the locked room. The room where Margaret Blackwell spent 14 years. The room she never left. Not really.